So although that we are not meeting on campus today as we normally would for learning together during advisor training, we would still like to begin today's presentation with a land acknowledgement of Humber College. So Humber College is located within the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. Known as Etobicoke, the place of the alders in the Michi-Sagi language, the region is uniquely situated along Humber River watershed, which historically provided an integral connection for the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples between the Ontario Lakeshore and the Lake Simcoe Georgian Bay regions. Now home to people of numerous nations, Etobicoke continues to provide a vital source of interconnection for all. We acknowledge and honor the land we are walking on, the moccasin tracks of our ancestors, and the footprints of the future generations to come. Before we get started, I would just like to quickly acknowledge our advisor training committee this year. As many of you know, we normally would be meeting as a 2-day in-person conference, which would have been hosted back in May. And unfortunately, due to the coronavirus this year, we have had to pivot and change our plans drastically. So throughout the summer, we spent some time speaking to colleagues to figure out what the best way would be for us to continue to provide these opportunities for learning to all of our community. And we landed on hosting it this week during Reading Week, as well as the 2 following weeks. And I'd like to give a shout out to our advisor training committee for all of their hard work, their dedication, their creativity, and their persistence in navigating technology to be able to make this virtual advisor training possible. We have 27 presentations over the 3 weeks with over 50 presenters this year. And we have over 200 registrants, which is more than I believe we've had in the past. So thank you all for being here. And I'd just like to acknowledge Purna Gubala and Allison Scully as our co-chairs for this year's advisor training, as well as our committee members, Alana Lewis, Crystal Bika, Keisha McQueen, and Vanessa Kubakub, who have joined us in planning this year's amazing training. So thank you to our committee. And as the lead, it's really been a pleasure to be able to work with all of you to put on such an incredible event this year. Before we get started with our keynote presentation, I'd like to invite Laurie Rancourt, Senior Vice President Academic, to say a few words and opening remarks.
Thanks, Dimple. And as I put in the chat, I'm not going to be turning my camera on today because I am having a bit of connectivity issue, so I don't want to drop on all of you. I'm also not going to take too much of your time because I think that it's much more important for you to hear from people like Dejan than me. But I also think that it's important and want to thank Dimple and the organizers for giving me the opportunity to say a few words to you as you are engaging in this important work. I know that you're also going to have the opportunity to hear briefly from Jason Hunter, my colleague in Student Success, because we're both really co-sponsors of all of this work that you're doing, and really recognize that it's work that has to cross departmental lines for it to be successful. I'm actually really thrilled with the title and the theme of your training this year, which is Advising Without Silos. And I think that through the integrated advising conversations and a lot of the work that we've been doing collectively, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to break down silos and make sure that we are supporting students in ways that matter and are relevant to them. And I did get a chance to read the description of the keynote that Dejan is going to be giving you today. And, you know, I do want to thank you, Dejan, really sincerely for taking the time to speak with us today, because it is only through hearing the student voice, the firsthand experience, that we're going to be able to learn and adjust our approaches and ensure that they're appropriate and meaningful. I think that as long as we keep that student voice and that student need, that student experience at the center of all of our decision and process making initiatives, we're going to be much better able to create an environment that doesn't leave students behind. I do think that you know, the final thing maybe that I'll say before I let you get on with it is that in the description of the session, Dejan talks about the fact that we are all, you know, only one caring educator away from student success. And I think it's important for us to realize that we are all educators. All of us engaged in working in the teaching and learning environment have an educator role to play. And advising is something that needs to take many different forms, but also needs to be connected. And the work that you're doing, the fact that you're all taking time out of your schedules to engage in these sessions, these discussions, and this work are the things that are going to help us be increasingly successful in supporting students in achieving their own successes. So I think maybe with that, I will leave it there. And thank you once again, Dimple, for making it possible for me to speak. I hope that the rest of your sessions go very well, and look forward to seeing the learning in action as we continue down this journey together. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Lori, for joining us this morning, for your opening remarks, and for reinforcing the theme of this year's advisor training. We're really excited that we're able to see such a wide range of staff and faculty from so many different areas this year as part of our advisor training. We've really made a concerted effort more engaged with the learning this year, and to learn more about how we can engage students and support students, not just outside of the classroom and student services, but also inside the classroom, and really prepare our staff and faculty for some of the challenges that we know students are experiencing right now. So thank you so much, Lori, for joining us. I really appreciate it. Oh, my apologies. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dejan Hamilton. Dejan is also known by his stage name, Lucky Sticks, and is a dynamic, award-winning motivational speaker and the founder of the Tune In Foundation. Dejan says in his abstract for today's keynote, according to the statistics, I should be dead, incarcerated, or uneducated. At some points in my life, it appeared as though some of my educators perpetuated these systems. So how come I didn't end up yet another statistic? The answer is caring educators. Please join me in welcoming Dejan Hamilton in a brief intro video. Oh, Dejan, unfortunately, we don't have any sound. Let's see if we can try it again.
Yeah. Was I muted? Can you hear me now?
You were, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Let's see if that changes. All right, here we go. Perfect. And volume, thank you.
Dejan Hamilton wants you to tune into your heart and tune into your mind. He's inspiring people all over the country with the message that their situation doesn't determine their destination. When you find something to live for and commit to it, anything is possible. Dejan is a musician, artist, and teacher. He's been recognized at home and across the country as the first Canadian steel pan player to graduate from Berklee College of Music. He's performed all over the world as Lucky Sticks and is famous for his electric personality and incredible talent. Growing up in poverty, Dejan didn't have a lot of chances to learn music. So he started a summer camp called Musicpalooza, which teaches music to kids who have never had the chance to learn. He has also started a foundation called Tune In, which has helped Dejan visit a lot of schools to talk to kids about following their dreams. He's motivated and inspired people across the country. And now he's here to share his message with you. Give it up for Dejan Hamilton.
Hello, and good morning. Thank you so much for having me here, Dimple and team. I am very, very, very excited this morning. I know this is kind of probably weird for some people, or it's weird for me giving a keynote virtually, but I'm gonna try and make this as meaningful, as impactful, and worth your time waking up early this morning to be here with me. I really, really appreciate it. I hope everybody had their coffee if you're a coffee drinker, or your tea if you're a tea drinker. And we're gonna get right into it. So why am I here with you today? As you can see, the title of this talk is that every student is one caring educator away from being a success story. And I love what Lori said about, seeing yourself as an educator. Even if you're not an educator necessarily in the classroom, you make a difference in a young person's life in some form or fashion, whether it's in your own personal life or whether it's in the institution at Humber itself. So I want to first thank you, and a big round of applause to you, not only for joining us today, but for everything and all that you do for students at Humber. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. So as this the introduction said, I grew up as a statistic in the beginning. My mother, she was a single parent, and she was raising my sister and myself on her own. Um, as a young child, this is me actually at the age of about 6 or 7. And this was the age that I can remember wondering where my dad was. And I would have the opportunity to be able to speak to him on the phone. So I knew who he was. But I knew that he wasn't here with us. He wasn't with the family unit. So the odd times when he would give a call and he was living in Jamaica and we were living here in Canada, um, this young 6-year-old me would always wonder, it's so nice to be able to talk to my dad, but where is my dad? And how come he's not here with us? How come he's not in the family unit? And then I also remember my mom, because she was a single parent, having to work multiple jobs to be able to provide for my sister and I. So that means that she would have to be away working nights. And my sister, who's 8 years older than myself, would then kind of come into play mom role. So the both of us, or all three of us, my mom, my sister, and myself, we were the unit. We were the main team. But unfortunately, because we didn't have a lot of resources financially, that meant that we had to often be in places that belonged to someone else. We were renting, or we were living with family or friends. And oftentimes in those environments, we found ourselves in low income neighborhoods, and surrounding, and what comes with being in low income neighborhoods, highly racialized neighborhoods, inner city schools and such, are all of the other baggages. So I remember seeing a lot of homelessness around me, around where we lived. A lot of people, unfortunately, strung out on drugs, or dealing with prostitution. And it was just the norm to me, because that's what I grew up seeing around me. That was what was the norm for people outside. But my mom made sure that she wanted to protect me, so that whatever was outside of the four walls that she couldn't control, that hopefully I would have enough wisdom to be able to stay away from the negative influences, from the gangs, and from drugs, and from the everything that she didn't want to see me become a product of. And they always say that you are a product of your environment. And I like to challenge that, because I like to say, yes, you can be a product of your environment, but you can also be a product of a mindset, a product of having a strong mother or educator or an adult in your life who's able to steer you onto a better path, regardless of what is in your surrounding environment. So I remember thinking to myself, I always wanted a male role model and a male figure who would be able to help me to grow up to learn how to be, a man. Because my mom, as much as she can teach me how to be, a good citizen and a good child, she could never teach me how to be a man. And I remember I've always loved music. and I've always been creative. And as a drummer, as a percussionist, my hands were always going and music was always in my head. And as a creative, I was learning very differently. The way that I learned, I needed to be experiential with my learning. I needed to experience the learning. I needed it to come alive. I needed it to be creative, and I needed all of those different things. And unfortunately, I guess at that time, a few different things played a factor when it came to the educators, the early educators in my life. They would say to my mom, Dijon unfortunately lacks attention, or he can't read, or he can't speak properly.
Dijon, unfortunately, it seems like you have been muted briefly.
Hello.
There, thank
All
you
right.
back.
Yes, thanks for having me back. So yes, so unfortunately, they would say, Mrs. Hamilton, we really feel as though Dijon should be put into a slow class because he is not able to keep up with the rest of the kids, and he's not able to hear and read and see and speak and everything that a person should be able to do. I wasn't able to do for whatever the reason may have been. It could have been because of the racialized nature of my environment. It could have been because of the economic nature of my environment. But it seemed to be a trend in this neighborhood and in this community to continuously label the children from this community and in these schools as people who cannot do certain things. So my mother thankfully did not allow them to keep me down and did not allow them to put me into these slow classes or allow them to put me on Ritalin as they were suggesting. She stood up for me and she said, you know what? I don't know what your guys' agenda is. However, I know that Dijon is a smart child. I know that he's one of my smartest childs and he's inquisitive. And if he's creative or he's causing a distraction or whatever it is that you may be finding as a problem, how about you try and find a way to be able to connect with him and to teach him in a way that he can be taught. As we know, there's not just one way to teach someone, as we know that there's just not one way to connect with someone. But I wanted to go through some of the statistics of um, what I could have been based off of what the statistics say. So 35% of Black children in Toronto live in a low income situation. Also, 9.9% of Black men are unemployed. And then we have in 2016, there was 21.9% of Black men that obtained a bachelor's degree in 2016. Only 21.9%. So according to what is the norm, it wasn't really expected of someone like me, the Dijon, the 6-year-old Dijon that you saw there. It wasn't expected of me to necessarily, have to get a bachelor's degree, or it wasn't expected of me to have a high-paying career job, or it wasn't expected of me to really become anything much. So why don't we just slow him down or put him in a slow class or put him in something that, we feel as though will fit with him. So then what was the difference? What was something that really changed the trajectory of where I started from where I was able to start to transform, to meet destiny? So now let me introduce to you a character. His name is Rob Lunston. Not just a character, but an educator. An educator like you, a father like some of you, and someone who didn't believe in labels and didn't believe in the titles, but really believed that every student is one caring educator away from being a success story. So Mr. Blunson is his name, and he started a music program after watching a movie called School of Rock. I don't know if any of you remember the movie. So he watched School of Rock and he became inspired. And as you can see, Mr. B is a guitar player, and he's not a great singer, but he has the passion. So we got to give it to him. So Mr. Blunson started a program at my school called the School of Rock. And as I said, I always loved music and I needed an outlet to be able to foster that creativity and that part of me that really wanted to come out. So I remember approaching Mr. Blunson and saying, Mr. Blunson, I play drums and I really want to be a part of your music program. And he said to me, all right, if you're serious, come for an audition at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning and we'll see how it goes. So I remember waking up super early in the morning and telling my mom, I have to go to this audition at my school. So she allowed me to go. And I remember getting there at 6:45 and Mr. Blunson arrived and saw me there waiting. And he said to me, wow, you're serious. And I said to him, yes, I'm serious. I'm hungry for this. I really want to be a part of this program. So I auditioned for him. I got into his music program. And all along, Mr. Blunson changed from just being an educator simply to an educator who was advising me and becoming a mentor for me. Mr. Blunson would come early in the morning and he would pick me up whenever we'd have our rehearsals because he didn't think it was safe enough for me to walk through my neighborhood to the school, which was about a 15-minute commute by walking. He would come and drive early in the morning time, and when he would pick me up, he would not only just pick me up and bring me to school for the rehearsal, but he would pick me up and he would stop at the local coffee shop and he would say, hey, what do you want? And he would get me a hot chocolate and a sprinkled donut. That was my favorite. And all that time, he was changing from just simply being an educator who was running a music program at my school to being a advisor implementing a development advising type theory. And this is kind of what I wanted to talk about and share with you as well. Why is this important? How is this important? How can you apply a developmental advising when it comes to when you interact with your students? So the advising relationship that's created through conversations with your students serves as a catalyst for developmental advising. When you use a developmental approach, you focus on the whole person sitting before you and address every aspect of the student's life in the advising process. Because it leads to student growth, developmental advising is based on several developmental theories, such as those related to personal, cognitive, career, and psychological advancements. Developmental advising is used to assist students with goal setting, decision making, problem solving, creating self-awareness, and other areas to promote academic success. You see, like yourself and like Mr. Blunson, he saw the person. He saw the entire person. He got to know who I was. He got to know my background. He got to know my mom. He got to know my family. And he got to know my story and the different things that I may be dealing with. And he saw how he, by understanding the individual, not just the student, he saw how he could make a huge difference in my life by taking this approach, by understanding who I was and taking this approach to really start to become a mentor and advise me in a way that I felt that I could connect with him more. And he would, as we got older, he would always make a joke of, how times have kind of changed in a sense, but how things are still very similar in the sense of, he was a middle-aged white guy, he would always say, and, he would carry around this young black boy around with him in his band. And I remember we would fit, my drum set into his two-door sports car, and how he would come and pick me up early in the morning times and, pick me up to go to rehearsals, and we would do gigs around the city. And we were a good duo. We were, an awesome little band. And I'll always remember stuff like that. And I don't know whether he knew it, but he was constantly changing my trajectory. He was constantly changing the path and the things that I believed of myself. Because before, I was believing about myself that I was all of these labels that my prior teachers before had placed on me. And he started to really start to mold me into someone that believed, yes, I can do it. And yes, somebody does care about me. An educator does care about me. And also, he was that male figure, that person who I was always looking for as, a father figure or an older brother figure, or someone to help to guide me into what it meant to be a man. And he would um, allow me. I remember Mr. Blunson gave me my first opportunity at a summer job, and he taught me the value of working hard. And from that summer job, I was able to get my part-time job that took me all the way until I went away to college. Anytime that there was an opportunity, he would always call on me. And to this day, we still have a great relationship. He became more than just an educator. He became a mentor, a friend, somebody who really believed in developmental advising, whether he knew it or not. He believed that every student was just one educator away from being a success story. So fast forward, I said to Mr. Blunson, I want to be able to go to a high school to continue to build on my music pursuits. And the high school that I wanted to go to was out of my catchment area. I lived, like I said, in the inner city, on the downtown of my city, and this high school was on the uptown of my city in an area that was much more influential than where I came from. And I said, Mr. Blunson, I want to go to the school, but they won't let me go to the school. Do you have any ideas? Do you have any tips or any advice? And he said, who's the principal at that school? And I let him know who the principal was, and he said, okay, let me, give some calls and see what I can do. So he ended up knowing the principal at that school. They were pretty good buddies, and he got me into that high school. So I was able to then go to a high school that continued my journey along the path of music. So even though I was still living in my environment, I was able to escape every day for school. And it would be about an hour commute via bus to be able to get to this high school. But I said, you know what? I don't care whether my friends are going to another school, and I don't care whether it's an hour commute. This is the place that I want to be because I know that it's going to push me forward. And Mr. Blunt would continuously check in on me to see how things were going and to see if I was on the right track. Fortunately, because of that, because I was able to continue to keep fostering that music pursuit, I was then able to graduate from the high school here and be accepted to Berklee College of Music in Boston, which is a world-renowned school. They have alumni like Quincy Jones and John Mayer and people like that who, I saw like, okay, if this was the type of caliber of people that went to the school, this is somewhere where I wanted to be as well. But of course, as you know, the money was an issue again. So I remember holding a fundraiser, and Mr. B was right there once again along there to help to make sure that we could get to Berklee College of Music. And when I got to Berklee College of Music, I was now in a new space, in a new country, and I met this next educator here. And his name is Ralph. And Ralph was, I remember going into Ralph's class and remembering Ralph say to me these keywords here, that your network equals your net worth. And that hit home for me because I remember
Uh-oh. So sorry, folks. It looks like we may have lost Dijon and our first tech issue of advisor training this year. Let's see if we can get him back. Thanks for your patience. Okay, just heard from Dijon. He's just logging back in. And just as a reminder, if you weren't able to see Dijon in full screen, you can click on the three dots that pop up next to his name, and that will allow you to pin him to your main screen. So just in case anyone was having any trouble with that, you can do that. And I think Vanessa from our committee also put that into the chat. So he did leave on quite the cliffhanger. That's so true. I think he's just logging back in and maybe having some internet issues. So thank you for your patience. I'm glad to see that so many people are reflecting so far on what Dijon has shared about his story and sending notes in the chat. So thank you so much for doing that and for engaging with us and engaging with Dijon while he's speaking. I'll be sure to try to relay some of your messages to him at the end when we do the Q&A. And please keep in mind any questions that you might have for him. We can take those at the end. I see that Dijon has joined us again, so let's see if we can get him back up and running. Hello, welcome back.
Sorry. I guess my internet wanted to take a coffee break, but I'm back. No
problem. You left us on quite the cliffhanger, so everyone's curious to hear what happens next.
Yeah, so what happens next is I feel like we were at Berklee College of Music now. And at this point is when I met this next amazing, phenomenal, awesome educator. His name is Ralph. And Ralph, I remember walking into his class, and in one of his first classes, he said, your network equals your net worth. And I remember this really hitting home for me because when I think about net worth, I constantly think of my net worth as zero, right? Like not much to really go off of. But he made the important point that people are the true value, is the thing that is super important, is really what is most important. Yes, we need money to be able to pay our bills and afford certain things that we may want in our life, but he put more of a value on the person rather than how much the person had. And that started to make me feel like I was home, like I was somewhere that I belonged, not because of how much I had or how much I did not have, but because that I was an individual, and that just by being in relationship with other people, that's where true richness lived. And that's where true wealth lived as well. So this network equals your net worth. I wanted to think about why is this important, and why is this important to you as an educator in your class or as someone who deals with students, and how can you also create an environment where individuals can realize that they are important and that they are a part of the richness of a community in the classroom, especially now that we are in a very strange time where everything is virtual, and we are trying to connect still, but we don't actually get to connect in person very often. How in the classroom specifically can you create and still hold true the saying or the thought process that your network equals your net worth? So something that I thought about and something that I had experience with when I was attending Berklee was I started to get into a lot of peer mentorship and peer advising and peer support. I realized that, and the Berklee realized that retention rates of students when they would come into a new environment, when they would come into a space, as a school like Humber that has lots of international students, which I ended up being an international student at Berkeley, it can be a very scary type of place because there's a huge culture difference when it comes to certain things, and you're on your own when it comes to a lot of things. You were used to, being home with mom and dad, or just mom or just dad, and now you're in a new space, in a new environment where you have to figure things out by yourself. So I joined a program. It was a peer mentorship program, and this peer mentorship program would encourage the leaders who were upperclassmen or people who've been there for a little bit longer to be mentors to the new incoming class. So they would pair us up with new students, and they would sometimes give us a stipend to be able to, do activities with these new students, but also to help with talking to other students about classes that they should take, or teachers that they should take, or certain things that they should think about when they're thinking about their educational pathway and their educational journey. And this was always a lot more effective because it was coming from another student who had been through what they have been through. So now that we are in a virtual setting, thinking about what are some ideas that we can apply to this same networking, but in a virtual sense. And an idea that you may want to implement, or that you may want to think about for yourself when it comes to your own advising in your own classrooms, is to take some of that time when you're going over your course syllabus or your course introduction. And if you have the opportunity, I know I'm not too sure on Google Teams, but I know on certain platforms like Zoom, you can do breakout rooms and say, you know what, we really believe in the value of people, and the people that you have around you may be the people that you end up working with, working for, or collaborating with in the future. So I want to foster, as an educator in my classroom, an environment where everybody realizes the value that we all have with each other. So take that time to say, you know what, we're going to do some speed networking, and put them into certain breakout rooms and give them a few minutes to be able to speed network with one another. There's so many students that myself, personally, has benefited from just being in communication with them. I can essentially go a lot of places in the world being since I was at an international institution, and because I made friendships and relationships with a lot of my colleagues and students that live in different places, I can pretty much go anywhere in the world and have a home or have a familiar face to be able to connect with. And that's super fulfilling, and that's super important. And I believe it's something that you should definitely stress starting from this point, not only when your students are now going to look for a job and having transactional relationships, but really pushing and stressing the importance of having a network. And this is something that Ralph taught me in his classes. He made sure that everybody in his class got to know each other in some form or fashion, and got to see each other as a very important person, not because of what they have and what they can offer, but just because our community, our network, is our net worth. So why did I tell you all of this, and why is it important to know this story? And why isn't it important for you yourself to share your story with your students? Something that I've realized is that people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. So as you're in your classes, and your first thought is to educate your students, which is important and is necessary. First, start to think about, how do I communicate with my students that I care about them? And as I communicate with my students that I care about them, then they'll care about what I have to say. They'll care about what I want to share with them. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I know as educators or faculty and staff, whether you're an administrator or not, the reason why you're in an educational institution or educational type of career is because you care about students and you care about their success. So be willing to, open up and to share with them your story. The amazing thing is that we all have a story, and sometimes we feel as though our story is very minuscule or, is not that impactful. But there's someone else who is living your story as well. There's someone who is experiencing the things that you have experienced. And sometimes people will see you here, not realizing that there was all of these different steps that you took to get to where you are. And by you being open and vulnerable to share those steps and those stories and to show people, I care about you. This is why I'm sharing this with you. You open up the doors and you open up, you give them the ability to be able to feel like they can open up and share with you as well. Another amazing quote that I love is, at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's the business that you're in. As an educator, yes, you hope that your students will remember everything that you've ever taught them and they didn't just cram for the test or for the exam or to get, the job opportunity or whatever it is. But, sometimes you don't have control over that. But what you do have control over is how people will remember that you made them feel. And that's what the educators that changed my life and changed the trajectory of my life did for me personally. So what's the benefit? What's the benefit of doing this, of being vulnerable? Because it's already tasking to be an educator. It's already a lot of work. It's already a lot of sacrifice, and you give a lot, you give a lot, you give a lot, you give a lot, and it may come across as I'm asking you to give even more, to be open, to be vulnerable, to share your story, to care about every student, not just as, another number or another student, but as a human being, as a person with another story, and to get to know their story. This is a lot. This is a big ask. What's the benefit of this all? So first, let's talk about the graduate. When a student graduates from college or university, it has a positive effect and impact on not only the graduate, but it also has a positive impact on the institution and society. For the graduate, they are able to develop greater cognitive skills and higher levels of subject matter knowledge and qualify for more desirable and higher paying careers. You change a life by, keeping the continuum going, right? When it comes to the institution, Humber, how does this benefit you, this approach? It benefits the institution, Humber, with higher mention and graduation rates. They are more efficient, and you enjoy greater levels of alumni and public relationship and governmental support. And then finally, for society, how does it benefit society? Society benefits from a more highly educated citizenry through enhanced public discourse, higher rates of civic participation, and higher tax receipts. Everybody benefits, everybody wins, and you're a part of that. So what's the difference? What's the big difference that's being made? The difference between a statistic, someone who was like me that said that I was not able to basically be anything, couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't speak, put me in a slow class. Didn't seem like there was much of a future that was placed in front of me, much expectations that were expected of me. Just like the statistics that I had read for you earlier about, Black youth here in Canada. It seemed as though I was on the trajectory to continue that to just be another one. But what was the difference between me being a statistic and me being a success story? It was someone like you who's an educator, who cares about youth, who cares about the future, and who cares about investing into the future. So yes, it's hard work, and yes, it's going to take some, perhaps extra work. And congratulations and kudos to those who are already doing this. And if this is a reminder for some people to, get back or to remember why you were doing it in the first place, I hope that you will see the difference, and you'll hear from a first-hand story. And I'm sure many of you have your own first-hand stories of educators that made a huge difference in your life, and the reason why you're in education in the first place because of an educator that made a difference in your life. So today, I just charge you and encourage you to continue to be the difference. The difference between a statistic and a success story is you. And every student is one educator away from being a success story. So thank you very much. I appreciate you for your time and for listening. I hope this provided you with great value. And if you have any questions, or I'd love to hear comments, I open the floor for that as well. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
This has been fantastic, and I will clap for you since I'm on screen right now. Dijon, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I know the comments are going to start streaming in, and I hope we haven't lost you. You look frozen, so hopefully Dijon is still with us. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Dijon, about how you got to the Berklee School of Music, the role models that you had, that you shared with us, who we can look up to, like Mr. Blunson and like Ralph, and the lessons that they taught you throughout your life. Although we may not be buying sprinkled donuts for students, I think you said something so powerful early on about how Mr. Blunson believed in you and cared for you, and that changed the way that you saw the labels that you had put on yourself as well. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I can see that there are tons of really great messages about how inspiring your story was, and thanking you for sharing your inspirational story with us. We do actually have a question, and I see that Dijon's frozen, so I'm really worried that he's left us. Let me take a look real quick and make sure that he's still in the chat here. Oh no, we lost him. We'll have to wait to see whether he joins us back so we can ask him a few questions. Yeah, it looks like he's left. While we're waiting for Dijon to come back, I did briefly put a link in the chat for our workshop feedback for today. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I've put the link in the chat as well. Dijon, it looks like you've returned. But I will ask people, while we're just getting Dijon set up again, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to complete our survey. You can scan the QR code here, or you can use the link in the chat. Please take a moment to fill out our survey. And if you do have any questions, Christine, I saw that you put one in the chat earlier, so I'll be sure to highlight that for Dijon. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to take those. So please type them into the chat, and I will review those while we get Dijon set back up here. I think this is so great. Thank you for all of your comments. I think, Monique, you made a comment about advocating for the students that we work with, and I think that's so important that, Dijon didn't talk about necessarily directly in terms of advocacy, but really that's what his instructors and what his mentors were doing for him as well. So I think that's so great. A powerful and beautiful story. Feeling so inspired. Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you, everyone, for your comments in the chat. So let's see here if we have Dijon. Dijon, have we
Hello.
you joined us again? There you are.
Hi.
Perfect. So Dijon, we did have a question for you from Christine, who's one of our program coordinators. So let me just scroll back up here. Christine asked, how do you use the principles of intentional support in your day-to-day life now?
I love that. That's such a great question. Intentional support in my day-to-day life now. So the students that I support, I run a music school as well on the side. I make sure that I don't just teach them on, on the Mondays and Tuesdays and stuff that I teach them on, but I make sure that I check in with them throughout the week, and really just being intentional again when it comes to what are things when we have our conversations during our lessons and sessions. What are things that they, and thank you so much for that question, by the way, what are things that they talk about that they care about? So if they are speaking about sometimes they're speaking about Fortnite or some game that they're interested in, I try to be intentional about learning a little bit about that thing that I've heard them speak about, so that I can then support them just based off of showing them that I'm interested in the things that they're interested in, just because they're interested in it, not because I'm necessarily interested in myself. So so being intentional about not just supporting in, again, like I said, transactional ways, but supporting in ways of I care about the students and I care about the things that they care about. Almost thinking about being like in a relationship. You care about the things that perhaps maybe when you met your partner, you didn't like basketball, you didn't care for sports, but because they liked it, you got to know a little bit about their sports. So that's just one way that comes to mind right away that I think about when it comes to really being intentional when supporting my students on a weekly basis. Thank you for that question. And I hope that answers the question.
That's great. Thank you, Dejan. And I see that Christine has commented in the chat that says, great tips, Dejan, great advice. It's good to hear that the things you try to do, Christine tries to do as well, which is great. And Dejan, I don't know if you had a chance to hear, as I was reading some of the comments that have been streaming in the chat about how inspirational your session was this morning, how grateful people are that they joined and got a chance to hear your story. So I don't know if you had a chance to hear that, but I wanted to make sure that we commented. So Tiana here has said, I loved your point on promoting a relationship-focused environment in the classroom, especially during these times. Question, what advice or thoughts do you have around fostering this in a virtual world while taking into account the different factors that could impact student success? For example, access to internet, access to technology, etc., so that we aren't unintentionally creating separation. Great question, Tiana. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Something that I've personally heard myself is a parent who was speaking to me about their student, and their student usually had a rough time even within the school system when it came to his academics as well as focusing. And his mother said to me, my son is really excelling because he has a great teacher who actually calls in. So there may be a barrier between, the online learning may be even more difficult for him because now he's behind a computer screen, whereas his teacher and his principal understands that. So what they've been doing is actually calling his mom and checking in with her son to make sure that he's feeling supported in this new virtual setup. So again, I'm not sure exactly what what the protocols are when it comes to student and teacher relationships, but hearing that has been something that has worked for another parent who may face certain barriers of just taking the extra step or the extra mile, or thinking about the alternative way. Great points. Lack of internet and certain things like that may make it difficult for certain students to be able to be learning virtually, and might create barriers for them. So are there other ways around it? Making a phone call and checking in on them, being able to have them meet with you, somewhere at an office or somewhere where they can pick up probably, some of their assignments, or, get some of their assignments, or whatever the case may be. So that's something that I might be able to just be able to advise when it comes to, a possible solution where there may be barriers when it comes to the virtual online world.
Thank you, Dejan. That's so true. And I think COVID has added such a layer of complexity to how we interact with students, and normally being able to post office hours or invite students in for a quick chat to see how they're doing. But you know, calling, I think, is still is something that I think we forget we can do sometimes. And I know I spend so much of my day in front of Microsoft Teams and that I forget, you know, to pick up the phone sometimes. So Annette shared a lovely message that you shared a lovely message, and that at the end of the day, we're blessed to have the opportunity to make a difference in so many people's lives. So I definitely resonate with that, Annette. Thank you.
Yes.
And Crystal has mentioned she's aware that some of the program coordinators that she works with as an advisor make the time to call and check in with each of their students, which is so phenomenal to hear. And another comment to say that this is 1 hour. This 1 hour session is extremely worthwhile. So thank you so much, Dejan. If there are any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I want to take another opportunity to say thank you to Dejan for sharing your story with us, for being such an inspiration to all of us. I think sharing your story as a student and also what you're doing now as an educator is so valuable in terms of what we are trying to do as advisors for students, and reminding us the impact that we can have and how much it means to students when we show them that we care. So thank you so much for being with us here today and spending the hour with us. I hope that we have a chance to meet you in person, maybe to experience some of your musical talent in person one day. So we hope one day when the world opens up again that you can lug your steel pan over to Humber College and join us in person. So on behalf of Humber, Dejan, thank you again so much for being here. And thank you to all of you who have spent the last hour with us in our first virtual keynote of advisor training. We hope that you have a chance to take a look at our schedule and join us for some of the other sessions that are happening today and for the next 3 weeks. And again, a gentle reminder, if you could please fill out our survey for today's session. I'd love to share your feedback and all of your positive energy with Dejan from our survey. So thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Wednesday. It looks like the sun is out, so thank God for that. And have a great rest of your Wednesday. Take care.
Thank you.